Okay, these are notes 17.3 about the anti-war movement during the Vietnam era, and we're going to watch a clip over a Vietnam War protest. Okay, so when we look at the war protest, one of the main reasons why many people protested the Vietnam War was because of the drafts. So 1.5 million were drafted during Vietnam. Um, this amount of people, it's quite a bit actually. In the very beginning, it was kind of like a local school board, which runs our school district, that were called local draft boards. So they were people that were selected from the community that would basically have a list of eligible people and then decide who would go and who would stay based on. Originally, it was supposed to be based on need and what the person had in their personal life. Were they essential in some other way to work at a hospital or something like that? Many times African Americans were chosen before whites by these local draft boards, so they obviously could be very partial. When African American soldiers went to Vietnam, many of them served in combat positions and were more likely to be sent on a suicide mission. And so, compared to the amount that were serving, they had more casualties. Everyone in the beginning was selected by draft boards, but in 1969 they established a lottery system that basically everyone got a draft card. The draft card had a number, and then at a certain time each week they would read the numbers, the draft numbers, and they would, sit there with their cards and see if they were the one that was supposed to go, that was drafted. So a lot of these anti-war protests were people, um, burning even the possibility of going to war. Now, many times, skipping draft or whatever could be punishable by imprisonment or something like that. Now, the college campuses were one of the strongest places for the anti-war sentiment. At Kent State University, there was a altercation between rioters and protesters. It kind of gotten out of hand, but then how things happen in riots. But one thing led to another, and the um, someone in the National Guard fired upon um, the crowd, and eventually, at the end of everything, 4 people were dead. Now, it was really upsetting to the anti-war movement, but also upsetting to a lot of American people. The violence overall was upsetting to them. One of the main groups that was a part of um, the campaign against the Vietnam War was called the Students for a Democratic Society, or SDS. They did things like teach-ins, kind of like sit-ins, except it was like it's the same principle except they're teaching instead of sitting at a lunch counter. Um, they also had a bunch of "We Won't Go" petitions, so those petitions would circulate college campuses. In the end, actually, very quickly, the 26th Amendment actually lowered the voting age from 21 to 18, based on the fact that if you're old enough to fight, meaning being able to be drafted, you should be old enough to vote to choose the president who's sending you into a war. If you're old enough to be able to vote. Another reason why there was more anti-war sentiment than possibly other wars, um, and this kind of starts into more of a modern era, and that is Vietnam becomes the first living room war. Living room war meant that the whatever was happening on the other side of the world was right on their TV screens. There wasn't, a big filter on it or anything, and even at this time, violence and movies and video games really weren't a part of the culture. People weren't desensitized to violence, and the fact that whether you're desensitized or not, the fact that it's real and it's not an act, it's not fake blood, um, basically, um, we look at Vietnam being much more unpopular because of the amount of death and destruction that was present in it. The other thing was that people felt like the government wasn't trustworthy. As things began to come out that maybe everything wasn't forthcoming from the government, that public distrust seemed to increase overall. Now, one of the things that happened that actually made it worse for the Johnson administration and better for the anti-war movement, or brought more people to the anti-war movement side, is the Tet Offensive. In North Vietnam, they came down using this trail and they infiltrated into South Vietnam. But what they did was attack 36 capitals in 5 cities. Now that's significant attacks. It was like a lot of little attacks everywhere, trying to take over certain areas. It was really a major push by the communists. Now, they did not win. They did not take over South Vietnam, but we actually kind of struggled to fight them back. So it showed that really these communists were determined to fight for one, and for two, if we're really not annihilating them by this point, maybe we need to change our tactic. So LBJ begins to shift the policy from victory to peace. He begins to look for how can we end this conflict rather than we need ultimate surrender and victory under Vietnam that's all democratic or a republic. Johnson was very unpopular as the war was unpopular. A brother of the dead president, JFK, RFK, Robert Kennedy, which is also called Bobby Kennedy, announced he was running for president, and he was a Democrat, as was Johnson. Johnson is the incumbent president. But under the popularity of a Kennedy, Kennedys were very popular, and many people wanted JFK back, and he seemed to be that ticket kind of back to what they had originally believed in under JFK. So when he announced his presidency, well, actually, it was kind of happened kind of at the same time, but LBJ said he was not running for re-election. Now, in the 1968 presidential race, RFK is very popular, makes a lot of speeches. The campaign and the election is in November. In April, MLK is assassinated on April 4th. And then 63 days later, RFK is assassinated on June 5th. Now, their assassinations were not connected to each other, and RFK's assassination had nothing to do with civil rights, but actually it had a foreign affair. Sirhan was upset over the support that we had given Israel in the Six-Day War, and that's why he killed RFK, who was in charge of some of that. Now, riots had taken place after MLK was assassinated, but riots also took place at the Democratic convention because they really couldn't decide as a party who they were going to support, an anti-war candidate or Johnson's vice president. And anytime you split a political party, the other one wins. Nixon promised that he would end the Vietnam War. He ran on that ticket. He said a silent majority, not the people out there protesting. There's a lot of Americans that just want this war over, and they're going to rise up and they're going to vote. And they did, and he won the election. Okay, so finishing up these notes, we have Nixon winning the presidency. I tried to play the video clip for you, but the sound's not working very well, even though I've tried to fix it a couple times. But anyway, these are notes 17.3 and ending with kind of Nixon going, starting the presidency.